barking back at Iran, no hope for the hirsute at Planet Fitness, and Charlie Kirk on the 2020 election next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Duke, and thank you for joining us. Later on in the show, we're going to have a fascinating discussion with Charlie Kirk about the 2020 presidential election and some of the main Democrat candidates. So stick around for that. As always, I'm joined now by Katie Petrick of the Healthy Republic. For the countdown, Katie, let's get to the stories of the week.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about President Trump, per usual, because he always has some interesting things happening. And this weekend, he took to Twitter, as he usually does, and he made some comments that are just wreaking havoc, I guess, for the left. So what happened was President Hassan Rouhani of Iran, he basically warned in a speech that the U.S., any U.S. conflict with Iran would be, quote, the mother of all wars. And Rouhani warned Trump that he says, quote, do not play with the lion's tail because you will regret it eternally. So what does President Trump do? He tweets back in only Trumpian fashion, using all caps, letting everyone know that he is serious about this. He says to Iranian President Rouhani, never ever threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We are no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious. And so obviously the left believes that we are now going to have a nuclear war, and I don't know how that's possible, because didn't Obama actually say that the Iranians, you know, they're trying to be moderate now and they want to become part of the rest of the world's nations? So I don't know how that's going to happen.
The American left is so juvenile that they think that Donald Trump will rain down nuclear weapons on a Tehran that has no nuclear weapons themselves. Look, what I love about this, and I've heard nobody talk about this, for how many decades now have these Middle East whack jobs been yapping at us? It's the equivalent of having an angry Chihuahua barking at a Great Dane. And what has the Great Dane's response been for 30 years? Yawn, right? To ignore it. Why not? If you've got a bully on a schoolyard, sometimes you got to yap back, right? And so what I see, if you throw that up, Mike, throw that up on the screen again. What I love about this response is it's for the first time in my adult life, somebody seriously has just barked back. Right? And what Trump basically says is exactly right. I wish somebody had said this before. Look, you know, you can threaten all you want, but there are consequences to threats, right? If you're going to threaten us with annihilation and the mother of all wars, let us tell you what's going to happen if you take the first overture in this battle. Throw that up again, Mike. Let me read this. Never, ever again threaten the United States, or you will suffer, I love this, consequences, the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. And this is what I really love, the shot across the Obama bow, right? We are no longer a country that will stand for your demented words and threats. That's wonderful, right? Now, the left's problem is they think Trump is a child and is going to do this. They think Trump is just sitting there fiddling with the nuclear warhead button, right? Playing games of touch and dare with them. No, Donald Trump is much more responsible than you think he is. He's not going to bomb anybody. Get over yourselves. The fact that the American left has so hyperbolized their responses to Trump. Whatever Trump does, they ratchet it up to mean the end of the world. What Trump is doing is playing a game of Great Dane and Chihuahua with Iran, and I'm glad somebody's doing it. Tell him what you think.
Well, I mean, in the words he uses, the language he actually used in this tweet reminds me much of what we would read in history books. I mean, that's a language leaders of the free world have used. And so it's kind of interesting that he actually is bringing that language back. And, I mean, our students wouldn't know the words of the old leaders because we are learning that students in Detroit are now suing their state of Michigan because they weren't taught to read. Our students can't even read to figure this out. So we have a story where 7 students in Detroit filed a class action suit against the state of Michigan, asserting that education is a basic right and they have been denied it. Now, the lawyers filing the suit are doing this pro bono from a Los Angeles firm called Public Counsel, and they contend that the students who are attending 5 of Detroit's absolute worst, lowest performing schools are receiving an education so inferior and underfunded that it's basically like they're not even going to school at all. And now the case they know is going to be a long shot, and it actually was already dismissed by a district judge, but they are appealing it. And basically, we're looking at a story that the fact that this story even exists is just a sad testament to our education in this nation.
Yeah, but you know what? The kids are right. The fact is that under all these big federal government policies, the teachers' unions, the social justifying of our curriculum, the fact that we're not teaching kids basic skills, instead we're co-opting parent responsibilities for teaching them values and social justice and sexualization at very young ages. The fact is that our kids aren't learning how to read. And in the inner cities, it's particularly bad. And in inner city cities like Detroit, it's really bad. These kids are 100% correct. Look, a couple of months ago, Arnie Duncan, the complete failure of a Secretary of Education under the Barack Obama administration, came out and said, American school kids should boycott school until gun control legislation is passed. What a jackhammer this guy is, right? Keep your kids away from school to promote a left-wing talking point for anti-Second Amendment legislation. Meanwhile, you've got kids in these same schools who cannot read and write when they graduate. They commit 8 to 10 years in these public schools, and they come out illiterate. And they want to sue the schools, right? Maybe what we ought to do is have these kids walk out of school for their education, not for some left-wing talking point. Maybe kids across the country need to walk out of public schools to protest the fact that they're not getting educated at grade level, that the kind of literacy they're getting puts them way, way, way behind even American kids 20 years ago. That's something that American school kids should protest. Protest the failed schools. Notice what the American left wants to do. They want to use school kids as human shields to go out there and fight for left-wing causes, to take their minds off the fact that they're not getting an education in the public schools themselves. That's what's got to change.
Yeah, well, what the high school kids are doing, though, is they are protesting in their own little way, because now the June SAT results just came out, and we have thousands of students who are demanding that they rescore the SAT test because they were, quote, shockingly low scores. Basically, what happened is the June SAT results came back, and a lot of students found that their scores were lower. But the reason their scores were lower is that the test was actually easier. So I guess the way they graded then, the weight is different. And so now they have this petition out there, and more than 26,000 signatures have been applied to it. And again, another sad testament to what the education our students aren't receiving.
But this is illustrative. The first story, you have native Detroit kids who've got a crappy education, who've been neglected by the system, who've been substituted nothing but junk and garbage for real educational opportunities. They want to sue the state that did this to them. And God bless them, they're right. This is the nasty flip side of that coin. Here you have American school kids who have been deprived of an education by teachers, teachers' unions, by Common Core, by big federal interventionist programs, by all this left-wing progressivism that's being fed instead of actual education. These kids, rather than sue their school or their state, or their federal government, they're now going to sue the SATs, not because they want a better education. They're not claiming they want a better education. They just want better test scores. They want to be ignorant, but score on their tests as if they're not. That's the kind of thinking you do learn in the crappy American public schools.
Well, it isn't actually that big of a deal, because now the SAT scores aren't as important as a entrance to any university, because we have Dartmouth, the Ivy League Dartmouth, who's having its business school now judging their applicants based on their niceness. The Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth University, basically the admissions criteria will be adding 4 attributes that administrators will consider: smartness, accomplishment, niceness, and awareness. Now, their webpage describes a person as being nice if they, quote, exhibit emotional intelligence, show empathy for the diverse experiences of others, and recognize that their success and others' success are interdependent, and generously invest in both.
Yeah, what was really creepy about this, it's another funny way that American universities are forcing their ideological, politically correct garbage on applicants. What they're basically saying is, by niceness means conforming to all liberal protocols, right? So recognize, like Elizabeth Warren said, you didn't build that. You have to, if you want to get into the Tuck College of Business at Dartmouth University, you have to recognize that your success isn't your success. You didn't build that. Everybody else is responsible for your success. You have to think about diversity in your empathy, right? Do you, as a potential Dartmouth student, recognize and empathize with non-quality Dartmouth students? And so this is nothing more than one more way Ivy League colleges try to get around the anti-affirmative action push in this country, right? Determining what people are based on the color of their skin. And so this is what I love about this, in a sarcastic way, it's utterly and totally subjective, right? Niceness as defined by radical liberals who run business colleges and Ivy League schools, right? So in other words, if you voted for Donald Trump, you can't be nice. right? If you are a white male, you can't be nice. If you are heteronormative, you are a boy who likes boys, you can't be nice. Now, this is a huge slippery slope, but I'm sick and tired of talking about slippery slopes because the whole damn avalanche is already sitting at the bottom of the mountain, and American school kids from kindergarten through graduate school are buried happily under it.
Wow. Well, okay, we are now going to aim higher because the House Democrats just introduced a bill that would require 2 years of debt-free college across the U.S., and it's called the Aim Higher Act. They are pledging to make higher education debt-free through this federal and state partnership. So they are encouraging more state funding for colleges and universities and a requirement that states who take this federal funding must then offer 2 years of tuition-free community college. And of course, all the other social justice type issues are going to be covered. All their different causes. They're going to increase Pell Grants. They're going to provide tuition assistance for students in the U.S. territories, things for Native Americans. Individuals who are incarcerated can get a college degree. All Dreamers can have access to federal aid. A whole litany of things are in this Aim Higher Act. But I think something that was really telling that I found in it was a little section called Improving Remedial Education, and it's quite an admittance by them. They said each year millions of students enter college without the prerequisite skills necessary to complete college classes. Correct. In response, colleges and universities developed remedial education programs to provide the skills needed to succeed and progress toward a degree. Although necessary, remediation makes degrees take longer to complete at a higher cost, lessening the chances of completion. This is especially the case at community colleges, where 2/3 of students enter needing remediation. In the 2013-2014 school year, remedial education cost students and their families about $1.3 billion in out-of-pocket expenses. So just looking at that small little paragraph, they are admitting that students entering college are not prepared. And then the ones who are going to even the community colleges, 2/3 of them need remediation, and it's costing $1.3 billion to these families.
Yeah, you know what's really remarkable about this is that if you bought my metaphor, right, that let's stop talking about the slippery slope to damnation with education. The avalanche has already crashed, and American school kids at all levels are buried. Here come the Democrats on their Zambonis, right, to put a layer of ice above the kids trapped beneath it. You're literally now going to put a gun to the head of American school kids, force them into mandatory, free 2 years of college experience, when by your own admission, in your own article, they're not doing anything like college work or anything like college prep work in elementary, middle, and high school. This is a recipe for disaster. What you're basically saying is we're going to take 2 extra years of high school, because that's what this is going to be. The remediation thing you just pointed out is right. The vast majority of American kids need radical remediation before they could even sniff college. So how do you fix that? In the name of social justice, what you do is you basically take 2 more years, slap it on the end of public school, call it college, and give them 2 more failed years of stuff that's not going to prepare them for the last 2 years of college. This is what you're doing as Democrats. You are extending the public school system. You are making a middle high school education extend all the way now into college, and still not going to give the kids the kind of education that would be worthy of college attention 20 years ago. So, in fact, way to go, Democrats. By gunpoint, make unqualified kids, force them into schools. And notice the rhetoric. The dreamers, the incarcerated, right? The forgotten transgenders, everybody who's going to really benefit from this by being forced into universities. What this will do, the only thing this will do, is require the first 2 years of a university education to be 9th and 10th grade in high school. That's what the lowering of expectations is going to have to include. It's already happening in this country.
All right, from fitness of the mind to fitness of the body. We have a story, and we actually have 2 stories I'm going to time together, and then I want to get your comments on it. Planet Fitness just had to call the cops on a naked man who was doing yoga. So the man's name is Eric Stagno. He's 34, and at the Plaistow, New Hampshire Planet Fitness, cops had to be called because he was doing yoga in front of mirrors while he was naked. And his excuse when he was arrested was he cited Planet Fitness's slogan, telling onlookers he thought Planet Fitness was a judgment-free zone. And he was charged with indecent exposure, lewdness, and disorderly conduct. Now, Downward Dog has a whole new image when you take a look at that man. And
yeah, go back and look at that dude. Can you look at that? Can you imagine the hair? It would be like a chia pet that's come to life, right? Do you remember the episode
Do
you remember the episode of Trouble with Tribbles from Star Trek? Can you imagine a squirming, gyrating mass of just that dude's body hair?
I'm not looking at
the
image.
back hair alone could furnish nests for robins in 3 different states. And that thing is gyrating naked in a Planet Fitness locker room? Is this what was happening? Or no, in the main area?
No, this was in the main area,
man.
in front of the mirrors.
You've got to, it's like Cousin It doing a striptease. That's the first Planet. That's the first Planet Fitness story. All right.
All right. So, well, just to conclude this segment here, Police Captain Brett Morgan said that Stagno's nude yoga made other gym members feel disgusted, sick, and unsafe. And that ties right into this next story, where Planet Fitness kicked out a woman who opposed a transgender being in the women's bathroom. Now, it's now a lawsuit. Liberty Counsel has taken on a case of a Florida woman they're calling Mrs. H, who alleges that Planet Fitness discriminated against her after she objected to the presence of a man named Jordan Ivy Rice being in the women's locker room. Now, according to the complaint, Mrs. H's membership was terminated because she actually objected to this happening. And the complaint itself says that she was disturbed by Rice's presence in the locker room. She had asked him to leave because this Mrs. H actually had been a survivor of attempted rape. So she's very keen on what's happening in her surroundings. And when she asked Rice to leave, he smirked back at her, continued to stare, and stood in front of the mirror applying makeup. And this went on for an hour. And according to the people who worked at Planet Fitness, they observed him enter and exit the locker room wearing the same clothes. He had not showered. He had not changed. And despite a male employee actually watching what Mr. Rice's behavior was, he claimed that it was over the top, but they didn't intervene and ask him to finish what he was doing, and he was permitted to sit in the locker room for more than an hour.
Yeah, thinking about the contortions, pun intended, that Planet Fitness, liberal organizations like Planet Fitness, have to go to justify this ridiculous inclusion policy, right? This weird notion that America has bought, that any dude, any hairy dude who feels like it can walk into a woman's room. And we also know from Planet Fitness, too, it's another case where men like this have been exposing themselves to women, right? They've been using their time in Planet Fitness locker rooms to expose themselves salaciously to women. So here's my solution. Here's what Mrs. H needs to do. She needs to document the amount of body hair on these men who come into the women's bathroom, because we now know that Planet Fitness will not tolerate hairy men doing gymnastics, right? So let's do that. Let's find alternative ways to be bothered. The Planet Fitness spokesman called it hairy man disgusting. It's disgusting that this dude is doing yoga. Now, first of all, if I'm a progressive lawyer, I immediately contact the ape man, whatever his name was, who was gyrating naked and hairy. I contact him, and on the behalf of hirsute people everywhere, a lawsuit, right? Why are we being anti-hair? Hair, long, beautiful hair. Remember in the 60s, we thought we had made progress.
That's true.
Remember the Cowsill singing about hair? Hair everywhere, hair all over the place. Feminism, right? Which has basically banned underarm razors in the name of solidarity, where women have hairier legs than Hulk Hogan. When you think about the degree to which hair has been attacked, I think there's a lawsuit here. Progressives should go after this.
Yeah, the one thing you didn't do when we talked about this stories is talk about the lunk alarm. I really thought you were going to go into that with Planet Fitness.
Usually the lunks, the brosteins, usually they're waxed all over the place, aren't they?
Well,
at least when I go to get waxed, I see a lot of them there.
Oh, do you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. This ties right into the next story of a lesbian feminist who transitioned to a male and is now being accused of mansplaining and heterosexual privilege. So this, woman who now says he's a man, Xander Keeg, is an outspoken radical feminist who is a lesbian. And then Xander decided to get male genitalia add-ons and now claims to be a man, but now has discovered that, what do you know, life is rougher as a man. So Xander said, when I speak up now, I'm often given the direct or indirect message that I am mansplaining, taking up too much space, or asserting my white male heterosexual privilege. And this 52-year-old said that, never mind that I am a first-generation Mexican-American, a transsexual man, and married to the same woman I was with prior to my transition. Now, the shoe's basically on the other foot now that Xander is a male. And she has found a significant reduction in friendliness and kindness now extended to me in public spaces, and now feels as though I am on my own. No one outside of my family and close friends is paying any attention to my well-being.
Yeah, you know, this is, again, the walking, talking definition of the insanity that's liberalism. So you have a woman, a biological woman, who is a radical, speaking of not shaving, who is a radical feminist, right? Radical lesbian feminist. And she does exactly what a good progressive is supposed to do. She follows her genetic imperative, right? Her biological imperative, what she seems to believe she should have been born as. She takes the so-called brave leap of having transgender surgery, right? Reassignment surgery. Now she is a man, but she still has the same lesbian feminist beliefs, right? And yet it is her new body, the new body that leftists keep talking we're supposed to celebrate. It's her new body now that confers on her, after just a few weeks of being a man, now confers on her white privilege and masculine prejudice, right? So the same feminists who liked her when she had junk parts of a girl, now that she's got boy junk, they don't like her anymore. This shows you how this whole thing is one big smoke and mirrors scam. It's nothing to do with bodies or body types, has nothing to do with white privilege or masculine privilege, none of it. It has everything to do with your politics, right? If your politics are our politics, we'll make this work somehow. But politics are determined not by what you look like, because once you become a man, right, the politics then get shifted, don't they? And so you see the whole thing as a big lie. It's one big lie across the board.
Now, this may be why one family has decided that instead of claiming any gender to their children, they're going to just raise them as babies. So NBC just ran this story called Boy or Girl? Parents Raising Babies. Let Kids Decide. The family is Julie and Nate Sharp, and they're raising their twin children, Zyler and Caden, using they, them, their pronouns, so they can decide for themselves if, when, and how they want to identify as a gender. They said raising children outside of gender norms is what they're trying to do because it'll guard them from the negative gender stereotypes. Now, the Sharps have not obviously disclosed the biological sex of either of the children, and they said they intend to tell their kids when they're older that gender is fluid and that not everyone with a penis is a boy, as some persons with male sex organs identify as female. The family is reportedly part of this small Facebook community that have like-minded parents. And to make this even better, just recently then on Tucker Carlson, lefty Kathy Aru, she went on there and says, you know, it's okay for the parents to not label their kids one gender or the other, and that kids can decide which one they want to be around the age of 4. Yeah. She maintained that choosing one gender is, quote, not a profound life decision.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to call the family the not-so-sharps. So notice what the not-so-sharps said. They said that they weren't going to make their kids choose their gender, but when they got older, they would tell them what gender was, right? In other words, what this is re-engineering your kids without their consent. You are not opening things up for kids. You're not leaving things unlabeled, nailed down. What you're doing is you are steering kids to a certain understanding of gender, right? You are skewing your kids so that they believe biological gender and genetics don't mean anything. You're actually descientizing your kids. This is like teaching your kids that the world is flat. Now, they're allowed to believe the world is flat. We'll let them decide at age 4 whether the world's flat or not, but we're not going to tell them it's not flat. And what we will do is suggest to them at various points in their development that they live in a flat earth. You would mock that, but you don't mock this. You are scripting these kids. You are not letting them decide what they are for themselves. The not-so-sharps, and the idea that 4-year-olds, you've all been around 4-year-olds, the idea that a 4-year-old has the wherewithal, intellectually, emotionally, or spiritually, to decide what their gender is absurd. If a 4-year-old is deciding what their gender is, they are deciding what their mother and father have already decided, and the people around them, this little Facebook community of lunatics, right? If that's a 4-year-old's whole worldview, they will decide the gender that the progressive parents want them to be. So this idea that you are somehow being a broader, more open-minded parent by doing this is exactly the opposite. You are scripting your kids. You are actually going against science and their own body, what their own body is telling them. You're actually destroying that for kids so you can flatter your own progressive vanity and you can explain how much virtue signaling you're doing to your progressive friends. Congratulations. Maybe if we had a serious child services organization in this country, you'd be at the top of the list for losing those kids.
Well, and we've seen this time and time again with parents, especially the millennial parents, treating their kids as if they're a pet or they're some sort of a doll or they're some sort of a prize that is to be, showed around the world. And we see it every day with this Facebook group. I'm sure the kids get put out there. Look at what, what Xander, I don't even know what the
Xander,
kids,
that seems
something
to be
like that. Whatever the kid's name
Xander was the other one. The lesbian feminist who became a man. Right?
Well,
Caden and something.
Zyler and Caden.
Zyler, there you go.
You put your kids out there and you just show, what good little progressives they are. And these kids are in for doomsday once they hit school, once they get out into the real world. But like you said, at age 4, kids can be whatever they want to be. And at age 4, I think most kids I know, they want to be some sort of a superhero. And that's what we have coming up next with a bunch of stories from Comic-Con, which just happened. Comic-Con's, where all the basement dwellers come out of mom's basement and they go and dress up and have a good time with all the Marvel cartoons and comics and all that. So we have the first story being from Fantastic Beasts. It's basically the prequel to Harry Potter. Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald. And they had a panel, and immediately they attacked Trump. So they were asked what they would do if they had magic in real life, because it's Harry Potter world and, what's with magic. And one of the co-stars, Zoe Kravitz, said, impeach Trump. That was met with plenty of cheers in the room, and then they turned to Dan Fogler, who's a character, I guess, in the movie who makes spells, and they're like, okay, well, what's this, spell going to be called? And he says, Impeachius Maximus.
Yeah, so you know what I love about that is this is what progressivism is. If you have a superpower, notice what your superpower is. It's politics. Not super strength, not the ability to save the environment by planting more trees or by putting a shield between us and the sun, right? If you're a liberal, your superpower of choice, right, is affecting the political will of the people, to taking away a sovereign vote in the name of your politics. That's why liberalism is a disease. I mean, can you imagine the tights, by the way? Can you imagine the tights they would be wearing as Caped Crusaders whose sole job is to oppose Trump?
Speaking of tights, one of the other co-stars, Ezra Miller, put in his own political twist on the question. He said, smash the patriarchy. And he did this while wearing a Toadette costume from the Mario franchise.
Yeah, I tell you, given the rampant radical masculinity, all these men with too much body hair and testicles that won't fit into their shorts, that coming at you would really smash the patriarchy. Can you imagine all these hyper John Wayne types out there, right, being approached to Mr. Marshmallow Hat guy? I mean, what better way to crush the patriarchy? I can imagine Charles Bronson, like the Magnificent Seven, right? All these guys, all these hyper masculine dudes being quashed by a bunch of dudes in tights and marshmallow hats. Comic-Con, I mean, it was funny, all this cosplay. It was funny when you were pretending to be Klingons and Wookiees, right? Hair seems to be the theme, doesn't it?
It is.
Klingons and Wookiees. It was funny when you were doing that. People didn't take you all that seriously. But the fact that comic books now have been completely hijacked by the social justice imperatives means it's just one more thing that pop culture has spit up. It's not worthwhile anymore.
Well, we're not even done yet.
No, we're not.
And we're not even done with this story because to top it all off, Johnny Depp plays Grindelwald. He's the bad guy.
Wait, wine-swilling, wife-beating, drug-taking Johnny Depp? That Johnny Depp?
That same
okay,
Johnny
just
Depp.
checking
That's
with
who
you.
I was going to... Yep,
Just
there was a
checking with
surprise
you.
appearance for him, and he came in character. He says, we who live for freedom or truth, the moment has come to rise up and take our rightful place in the world.
Yeah, boy, it must be really tough to have made $600 million over the course of your career and not having a pot to piss in. That must have been, I mean, my God, thanks, Johnny, the real victims of patriarchy, the real victims of our horribly classist system are the multimillionaires.
Yeah.
I mean, Johnny Depp proves it, right? He's the guy that we should really feel sorry for. He's out there crusading.
Well, speaking of the multimillionaires, we have Ryan Reynolds, who's the star of Deadpool, and at his panel of discussion, he basically opened the door to having his character Deadpool explore pansexuality. So a fan asked about future gay and bi representation in the Deadpool series, and Ryan Reynolds says, I certainly think that this universe needs to represent and reflect the world in very real ways. The great thing about Deadpool is that we're allowed to do things that the other superhero movies don't necessarily do, and if you've seen Deadpool, you'll know what that means. And that's probably one of them. It's something that I'd love to see more of, certainly through Wade, who's the name of the character, certainly through this universe, because it's something that we're building out more. We have a lot of tools in the shed that we get to play with.
Speaking of tools and sheds, and
there it is.
For the love of God, that'd be the best place for this kind of behavior, in a shed outside some backwoods country home. However, if you've ever watched Deadpool, like you say, you will recognize that it is the least realistic of Marvel universes. There's nothing realistic about it. Everything about it defies any even rudimentary common sense logic and physics that most of the Marvel franchise tries to operate relatively within. So the idea that you'd have a bunch of trans and bi subplots, the fact that this particular universe would be engaging in all sorts of deviance makes perfect sense, because let's be clear, he may be funny, but Deadpool is a deviant, isn't he? Everything about him is deviant. So I suppose if you're going to have all of this Marvel superheroes exploring their own sexuality, that'd probably be the place to do it.
Yeah, well, you can also take a look at this on TV, because CW just announced the first transgender superhero will be on Supergirl starting in season 4. And this makes TV history by having the first transgender superhero. Nicole Maines, who's a transgender activist and actress who previously won a discrimination lawsuit after her school refused to let her use the girls' bathroom, is going to appear on the show. And her character is going to be Nia Nall, a.k.a. Dreamer.
And let me guess, what's her superpower going to be? Wearing a tampon while getting a prostate exam? Is that what we've got? I mean...
That may be where we're at.
Because that would be a remarkable superpower. Never before in human history have you been able to have a period and get a prostate exam. I mean, it's revolutionary. Little kids everywhere wanting to be able to strap that pad on and take one between the shorts. I'm telling you, this is so beyond parody. I just parodied it quite effectively. But
you can write the script
beyond
for it.
that, I could write the script for it.
There you go.
Right? There she is, mild-mannered woman shopping in the Vagisil aisle, right, of the local Walgreens, and all of a sudden the thrum of she sees prostate medicine on the and it dawns on her. Suddenly the lights pop. Right? Showers of radiation comes down. Now she has prostate and the need for a tampon. And there's a whole, I got the backstory written. We really could do a great job with this.
Well, producers do describe her character as a soulful young transgender woman with a fierce drive to protect others.
See, that's the prostate. The prostate makes, it's the drive, it's that prostate. It's the thing that drives men to horribly testosterone levels of violence. But all of that unchecked toxic masculinity centered in her prostate is now rectified by the fact that there's the tampon application,
That's
right?
True. You're going to have a lot of sponsors, too.
Yeah,
Walgreens,
I mean, my God, yeah.
You know, Kotex or Tampax.
Tampax, you could have prostate doctors, the rubber glove test, right? We need to be hired by Marvel Studios immediately.
All right, on that note, we're going to turn to our Dunce of the Day. The best time ever. So, our first candidate in this episode's Dunce of the Day is none other than Sister Mary Clarence, Whoopi Goldberg. On The View, she basically was accused of spitting and then cursing out Jeanine Pirro and gave other comments. And basically what happened, Jeanine Pirro went on The View. She's going to talk about her book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, The Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy. She got into a verbal spat, shockingly, with Whoopi Goldberg, and basically was kicked off the show, but Whoopi kind of saw that it was like the end of a segment, so she made this whole dramatic get out of the show thing. And then over the next couple days, it was a she said, this back and forth as to what happened next. But on the show, Jeanine actually said that Whoopi is suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, and that's what set her off. And now Pirro saying, well, thanks, Whoopi, because now my book that I went on there to promote has hit #1 on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
You know, it's hard to take Whoopi seriously. She actually had sex with Ted Danson.
Oh, yeah.
Remember
I
that?
About that.
So yeah, we have to make we have to make allowances for mental derangement. Sam Malone. I mean, think about how many sexually transmitted diseases now rummaging around the brain of Whoopi Goldberg she contracted from having sex with Sam the bartender.
And maybe she had an Ambien when she was also saying
Yes.
that. Okay, second candidate, Michelle Wolf. And I won't make anyone listen to her voice, but she did another so-called comedic sketch where she makes a comparison of ISIS with ICE. So she did a mock recruitment video for Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, which is ICE. And so it's supposed to explain what the organization is by saying the phrase ICE is. And so ICE is, ICE, it sounds like ISIS. And now at the end of the little segment, Wolf appears as Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen to give a take on what ICE is.
I'm Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. It's popular nowadays to say ICE is bad, but there's no better representation of American values right now than ISIS. And as an equal opportunity employer, we accept all levels of experience and education, from low to very low, and actively welcome those with diagnosed anger issues.
If that's true, if there's really no difference between ICE and ISIS, I urge you to walk up to ISIS members in foreign places and lecture them about their border policies. You do that, because you're going to find out, you're going to have a huge wake-up call, Michelle, that even unattractive women in stupid costumes with low IQs are sexual victims in places like that.
Okay, candidate number 3 is David Mike Hogg, who's the boy who finds violence abhorrent unless he's threatening President Trump. And he put out this tweet, which was a response to Trump's tweet to Rouhani, which is what we kicked off the show with. And he says, "Never ever threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences, the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We're no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious." So basically, he took the same words and he just said, "Now this is to U.S. President Trump."
So if I understand this correctly, Donald Trump, who has the American military behind him, threatens an enemy who's threatened us.
Yep.
David Hogg, Daniel Hogg,
David
Hogg has come out and said basically that if you continue to threaten Iran, I'll threaten you the same way. And other than little girly stick figure arms, what does he have in his arsenal? With what?
Twitter.
Twitter, okay. As if Donald Trump doesn't know how to use Twitter.
Clearly. And just so David Hogg knows, because I know he hasn't been going to school, it's a felony to threaten the President of the United States. Just FYI to him. All right, candidate number 4. Cory Booker, the senator out of New Jersey, and he had a press conference on Capitol Hill where he said that anyone who does not oppose Supreme Court nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh is complicit in evil, and he did so with Bible text. He says, "I'm here to call on folk to understand that in a moral moment there is no neutral. In a moral moment there is no bystanders. You are either complicit in the evil, you are either contributing to the wrong, or you are fighting against it." And then he sort of quoted Psalm 23, which includes, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." Okay, that's also found in Coolio's Gangsta's Paradise. So I think that may have been where Cory Booker got it from. But he says, "It doesn't say that I sit in the valley of the shadow of death. It doesn't say I'm sitting on the sidelines in the valley of the shadow of death. It says I am walking through the valley of the shadow of death. It says I am taking agency that I'm going to make it through this crisis. And so I'm calling on everyone right now who understands what's at stake, who understands who Kavanaugh is. My ancestors said, if someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. He has shown us who he is."
You're a hypocrite, Cory Booker, because you were a senator when Gorsuch was elected to the Supreme Court. The left said the exact same things about Gorsuch they're saying now about Kavanaugh. And they approved Gorsuch while you were a member of the Senate. What that means is you belong to an organization that, by your own words, just approved evil. Why didn't you quit? If you are a man of principle, the first time they supported a right-wing hater like Gorsuch, you should have walked away, but you didn't. There you are again with Kavanaugh. And when the Senate confirms Kavanaugh, you'll still be in your job. So you're the one complicit with evil, Cory Booker.
All right, and finally, number 5 is Trevor Noah. He's the South African who is the Daily Show host. He's under fire now about an offensive joke that he had put out back in 2013 when he was doing a live set, and it's about Aboriginal women. He said, the joke goes, "All women of every race can be beautiful." And I know some of you are sitting there now going, "Oh, Trevor, I've never seen a beautiful Aborigine." But you know what you say? You say "yet," because you haven't seen all of them, right? Plus, it's not always about looks. Maybe Aborigine women do special things. Maybe they'll just, jump on top of you. And then he made this suggestive gesture. And because the video was saved quickly, because Daily Show has been trying to wipe clean the internet of this video, it's getting out there, and he had to apologize. But he says he doesn't make jokes like that anymore, and he's always willing to learn. Has he been fired? No.
And of course, you would not extend any apologies, Trevor Noah, or any latitude to anybody else who did these things. You also made crude comments about France, the France national soccer team that won the World Cup, talking about how they were really African and denying their agency as French citizens. You know what? You're just a smug punk. You really are. You got caught up in your own press. You have said terrible things about Aboriginal women. You basically found the one demographic that you can pretend is lower than you, that progressives would pretend is lower than you on the sympathy scale, and you went after them viciously. By your own medicine, the medicine given back to you, you should be removed. For me, it's Trevor Noah. For me, the dunce of the week is Trevor Noah, for being such a preening racial hypocrite, for being the conscience of the voice of the American left, the conscience of the American left, in attacking Trump for being a racist because he didn't react fast fast enough to Charlottesville, you've got a lot of racist skeletons in your own closet, and apparently you don't mind bringing them out to show people. So you are the dunce of the day, you moron.
Okay, well, I did not choose Trevor Noah. I went with none other than crying Cory Booker, because he said, and the quote is, "My ancestors said if someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." And we know who Kavanaugh is. Kavanaugh is a married man with 2 daughters. He's a devout Catholic who serves soup at a soup kitchen. If there's something evil about him, Cory Booker really needs to look at himself, because the reason that they are so going crazy over Brett Kavanaugh is the fact that maybe, just maybe, he might vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. And what does Roe v. Wade do? It allows abortion. So if you're going to sit here and quote Psalm 23 back at us, let's take a look at some other Bible verses and ask, what does the Bible say about murdering innocent babies?
So it's the Booker Noah Prize for Dunce of the Week.
Dunce of the day.
Dunce of the day, and the week, and the month.
And the month. And okay. I don't know that either of them have anything to do with hair, but we'll end this segment with that. If you like what you just saw with Dr. Duke and myself, make sure you watch us again either on YouTube or Facebook, and make sure you head over to SoundCloud and iTunes to listen to the podcast versions. Up next, we have Charlie Kirk with Talking Points.
Time now for Talking Points with Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA. Charlie, according to a new poll out by the Wall Street Journal and NBC, Trump's job approval just keeps going up. It's climbed to 45%, 88% approval from Republicans. Can you talk a little bit about, with all that the media is throwing at him, how is this possible?
He's the most popular Republican president, actually most popular president within his own party, excluding post 9/11 since World War II. It's an extraordinary accomplishment. But the reason is that he is the keeper of promises. He does what he said he's going to do. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He canceled the Iran deal. He withdrew us from TPP. He withdrew us from the Paris Climate Accord. He has massively deregulated the economy. He pledged to get rid of 2 regulations for every new one that was put. He's gotten rid of 22 regulations for every new regulation that was put on the books. It's the first time the Federal Registry has gone down. He promised massive tax cuts. We now have seen the largest tax cut in American history, the largest middle-class tax cut in American history, the corporate tax rate going down from 37% down to 21%. And we've only just started to feel the explosion of economic growth that ensues because of that. And so, look, the president is the keeper of promises. And the reason the Republican base loves him is that we've been betrayed so long by so many different politicians that have been just saying things and not doing things, and the president has been fulfilling his pledges and promises.
I love that. You just gave Donald Trump his first Game of Thrones name. Slayer of progressives, keeper of promises, humiliator of mainstream media types, right? I love it. You could just have the epithets go on and on. And so this bodes really well. At this point in his first term, when you look at the history of presidential elections, he's going to be really, really difficult to beat in 2 years, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's going to convincingly win re-election. He is on pace to have high popularity in the states that matter. The midterms, we'll see what happens. If we keep the House, great. I think we'll almost assuredly advance in the Senate. But I'll tell you, Donald Trump is completely and totally redefining American politics as we know it. You're seeing all these fake 2020 contenders pop up. Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders. The Republican Party is the party of Abraham Lincoln. The Democrat Party is the party of Karl Marx. And they've gone so far left, they can't even figure out, what the soul is or what the center of their own party. They don't have a center anymore. And that's what makes the Republican conservative brand so attractive. And the reason that he will get reelected is because, one of the reasons he'll get reelected is because of how radically left the Democrat Party has become.
Yeah, I think one of the most remarkable aspects of the Trump presidency is he is compelling the Democrats to be who they are. Right. We don't have, even a George W. Bush who was so conciliatory, who wanted to make sure that the left liked him as much as the right, even though they never would. One of the things I love about the Donald Trump presidency is simply by being who he is driving the left to lose their illusions, to put away their fake faces and to become the radical Marxists that they are. And I think America sees it, and America doesn't want any part of it.
That's right. So when you unapologetically stand for the flag and for the anthem and for the country, it brings out the radicalism in those that hate this country. But as I commonly say, America's the only country in the world that even those who hate it refuse to leave. It's such a beautiful country, it has so many blessings that you have the freedom and luxury and flexibility to hate the very country that you're benefiting from. Donald Trump has made this country a better place. And I asked the question, are you thankful to live in America or are you angry to live in America? I think that's the two big questions right now going on. And the idea of America is fundamentally under attack by Marxists and these so-called progressives in our universities and colleges that want to destabilize and destroy the fundamental fabric of what is the greatest civilization ever to exist and the most benevolent, creative, forward-thinking, generous country in the history of the world.
Do you think this push towards socialism from the left, from the Democrat Party, is this something that's coming from the bottom up, or is this really just something the Democrat Party always is and has been, and we're just seeing it for what it is now?
Well, I think the Democrats in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there were some true blue dog Democrats, and I think they've been, Bill Clinton, for example, governed much more in the center than a Bernie Sanders would, for example. It's because the country is a center-right country. We are not a far left-wing progressive country. And so politics is downstream from culture, and culture is adjacent to lifestyle. So lifestyle, we still are a country that gets up and goes to work and pays our taxes. We want to see our kids go to a good school, go to church. Those values are much more compatible with a conservative political perspective than a far left-wing Marxist, anti-God, anti-freedom, anti-American narrative. And so you put those two things together, the Democrat Party is now going towards outward Marxism. Now, with that, the culture has also gone in that direction. Because you look, the country, some of our country is offended by everything they hear. They think they're a victim just because they got up on the wrong side of the bed every morning. And they want to be entitled to something just for breathing. As they begin to believe that, politics shift with it. And so politics is just a reaction of culture. You're not going to be able to have a successful political movement if the culture is not at least within the same couple of differential points within it. And so as the culture moves more towards a victimhood entitlement mentality, the politics will move with it. And that's what you're seeing right now with the rise of Marxism in America.
Speaking of the upcoming election a couple of years down the road, it's an interesting historical stat that in the last 80 years, only 2 incumbent presidents on either side of the aisle failed to be reelected. That's also a remarkable boon in Trump's direction. Do you have any thoughts as we're a couple of years out, but do you have any thoughts about what would the 2 or 3 main platform pieces of advice that Trump needs to push to guarantee that reelection in 2 years? What would you say are the 2 or 3 main issues he should be pushing?
So the presidents that didn't win re-election, technically Jerry Ford was never elected. And then the other one was, of course, Jimmy Carter in the referendum election of 1980, which actually was a lot closer than people think, and that only broke the last 8 days mostly because of the Iran hostage crisis, despite how horrible the president was. Goodness. And then George H.W. Bush in 1992. So it's very hard, actually, to beat an incumbent president. Very, very hard. Clinton won 2 terms, Bush won 2 terms, and Obama won 2 terms. But with that being said, you look going into 2020, I think Trump has a a great upper hand and strategic advantage to winning. Because he has great results. He's a phenomenal campaigner. He can define his opponent. And Americans are better off today than when he got inaugurated. They're much better off than they were under the Obama years. The world is a safer place. The economy is roaring and humming. And, we have extraordinary amount of optimism for the future of America.
You mentioned some of the early frontrunners from the Democrat Party, and it's almost hysterical. You've got Hillary Clinton, who probably right now may be the front runner, Bernie Sanders and his brand of tired old socialism, and people like Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris, who are just off the lunatic reservation. I mean, do you see anybody out there who really right now has the personality and the temperament to challenge Donald Trump?
No, I don't. And when you say they're off the reservation, there's no pun intended with that with Pocahontas, right?
Definitely. Pocahontas was what we like to call her.
Pocahontas, right. No, look, they're going to try to, I will say this, Joe Biden would probably be the hardest person for Donald Trump to beat. He can go after white middle-class working voters that are now the new Trump party, if you will. And it's more of a Trump party than it is a Republican Party right now, which actually I think is a good thing, because the tired old Republican Party of just backslapping deals and endless wars and not questioning the size and scope or cronyist involvement in government is not healthy or not good. So I actually respect more of the Trump model than the traditional Republican model. With that being said, I don't necessarily think that that the Democrats are going to be able to put up a candidate that will even be remotely competitive with the success of Donald Trump, unless there's someone I'm not thinking of. Duval Patrick is an interesting candidate, though. I think he could give Trump a run for his money. If I were to say someone who's going to definitely run for president that could build a coalition that's compelling, I think you got to keep an eye on Duval Patrick.
I don't know if you saw it today, but somebody in Hollywood, a Hollywood progressive, took a pickaxe yesterday to the Donald Trump star on Hollywood Boulevard.
This thing alone.
I see that as a win for Donald Trump, too. I mean, my goodness, that's the hardest a Hollywood liberal has done manual labor in my lifetime.
Donald Trump's putting liberals back to work against the own icons. Yeah, right. It's funny. The left is they're the most intolerant group of people that you'll ever come across. The most intolerant people are the ones that preach tolerance. They hate the idea that there are other ideas. They do everything they possibly can to silence the opinions and perspectives of those that they disagree with, which is at the heart of intolerance.
Charlie, my friend, it's always a great pleasure. Look forward to speaking to you again soon. And that does it for us this week. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, and we will see you next time.